15-year-old broke a world record in 1973, and he didn't just edge past the old mark, he tore through it. This is the story of the coach behind him, a man who turned one public pool in an Australian mining town into the starting point for 3 separate world and Olympic champions. Historians at the Sport Australia Hall of Fame put it bluntly. He hadn't shaved time off the record, he'd savaged it, sometimes ripping more than 10 seconds off in a single race. He was still in high school when it happened, with no scholarship, no sports science lab, and no altitude camp behind him, just a pool and a coach nobody outside Australia had heard of yet. That same coach would later get flown across the world to rebuild an entire nation's Olympic swim program, and we'll get to that. But first, you need to understand where this actually starts. Mount Isa isn't a place you'd associate with world records. Tucked into the red dirt of northwest Queensland, this remote mining town had a population of around 18,000 people back then, and its reputation was built on lead, silver, copper and zinc, not swimming. Bill Sweetenham grew up there in a working-class mining family, and coaching wasn't something he chose for himself. His father, a strict man by all accounts, pushed him into it as a teenager, and at around 17, Sweetenham was told to teach a fellow miner's son, a child affected by thalidomide, how to swim for free at the town's public pool. Something clicked the moment he started. He kept coaching at that same community pool, and within a short stretch, a team built from kids in a mining town, not a swimming powerhouse, climbed to 3rd in the entire country. Here's the honest part of this story, and it matters. Sweetenham didn't stay in Mount Isa to build his champions. What that one pool town gave him was a starting point, and he took it with him to Brisbane, which is where the real story begins. By the mid-1970s, Sweetenham had landed in Brisbane, stepping into programs already run by established, respected coaches. Nobody hands you credibility in elite sport, and he earned his the only way anyone does, one race at a time. One of his swimmers was a teenager named Stephen Holland, still in school, now facing grown men from the United States and the Eastern Bloc, countries running government-funded sports science programs built specifically to manufacture champions. On paper, Holland didn't belong in that pool at all, a schoolboy from a country with none of that machinery behind him. Nobody knew if a coach who'd learned this sport as a punishment, paired with a teenager who should have been worrying about exams, could actually stand on a world championship podium against that kind of system. That uncertainty hung over everything heading into 1973. Then 1973 happens and everything changes at once. The setting was the World Aquatics Championships in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, in the 1,500-metre freestyle, the longest individual race in the pool. 60 lengths, no coasting, no hiding, just a swimmer and the water for the better part of 16 minutes. Stephen Holland dove in, and he didn't just win, he took the world record apart. Historians describe it this way: he hadn't just shaved the record, he'd savaged it, sometimes taking more than 10 seconds off at a time. And in a sport where world records usually fall by fractions of a second, that's not an upgrade. That's a different category of swimming entirely. He walked out of Belgrade a world champion, gold medal, 1,500 freestyle. 11 world record swims followed over the course of his career. 11. Say it again. 11. A 15-year-old kid, coached by a man who learned the sport by accident, at a public pool in a mining town most of Australia couldn't have pointed to on a map. Let's put that number in context. This wasn't a regional meet. This was the actual World Championships, the same stage that's produced the biggest names swimming has ever seen. 5 years later, a different swimmer connected to that same Brisbane coaching setup did something almost as absurd. Tracey, Wickham, a teenager at the time, walked into the 1978 World Championships in East Berlin and became Australia's first ever swimming world champion. Not in one event, but 2, the 400 and 800 metre freestyle. Her world records in both events would stand for nearly a decade, and nobody touched them until 1987, when a young American named Janet Evans finally came along. 2 years after that, in 1980, at the height of the Cold War in Moscow, a third swimmer with ties to that same program added another chapter. Michelle Ford won Olympic gold in the 800 freestyle, and she remains the only woman outside the Eastern Bloc to win an individual swimming gold medal at those games. 3 swimmers, 3 separate world or Olympic titles, and one coaching thread running back to a kid who learned to teach swimming as a punishment at the only public pool in an outback mining town. Say that out loud and let it land. Did you see this coming? I need to know. Drop a comment and tell me whether you already knew Australian swimming history from the 70s, or whether this is the first time you're hearing any of these names. So what happened to the coach himself? Sweetenham didn't stop in Brisbane. He went on to serve as Australia's national head swim coach across 5 separate Olympic Games. And by the early 2000s, an Australian newspaper ran a headline that summed up the whole arc. The bloke from Mount Isa saving British swimming. He'd been brought in to rebuild an entire nation's programme, the very same nation that had spent years chasing times his Australian swimmers had already put on the board. Somewhere right now, another kid is probably teaching a friend to swim at the only pool in a small town nobody's paying attention to. Statistically, almost none of those stories go anywhere. But Holland, Wickham and Ford all started exactly like that. Ordinary, accidental, overlooked. With the next World Championships and the next Olympic cycle approaching, here's what I want to know from you. Can a story like this still happen today? One coach, one small town pool, producing genuine world champions? Or has elite sport gotten too expensive, too professionalised, too dependent on funding and facilities for another Mount Isa to happen? Drop it below. Every comment gets read.